Hey everybody, AC here, and welcome to part 5 of my Sonic timeline theory. This time, we have entered the World Tour era, and at the start of this, at the end of the previous era, was the Sonic Riders trilogy, with ending with Sonic Free Riders, and I theorize that after the events of Sonic Riders, Sonic gets a thirst for adventure, a thirst to see what else the world has to offer. So he decides that he wants to travel the world. He wants to see the world. But before he can do that, he learns that Eggman has an entire fleet out in space and is up to no good. So he goes supersonic, flies up there, has a battle, kicks Eggman butt, and then gets turned into a werehog, and the events of Sonic Unleashed takes place. After the events of Sonic Unleashed, he decides to go home. He decides to go home and read and just kind of relax for a bit. He's had enough adventuring for now. He just lost a friend. He just lost Chip. So he decides to go home, and we know that the next two games happen. Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic and the Black Knight. We know that the storybook games have to happen after Sonic Unleashed, because in the background of those games, before he gets in the background when we see his home, we see the wrist ring that Chip leaves him. We see it there on the shelf. So we know that Sonic Unleashed has to have already happened. So Sonic and the Secret Rings and then Sonic and the Black Knight happen in that order. Sonic and the Secret Rings happens first, and that's fine. And then Sonic and the Black Knight happens, and we know that has to happen after Sonic and the Secret Rings, because at the end of that game, it turns out he missed his date with Amy. He was supposed to go on a date with Amy, and he missed it because he got summoned into the storybook of King Arthur. And at the end, when she starts to get mad, he runs off. He's had his fun at home, and now it's time to head on out on another adventure. So we know it has to happen in that order. After that, he meets up with Tails, and the two of them hear about a interstellar amusement park that Eggman has built. And so the events of Sonic Colors Ultimate occurs. And we get our introduction to the Wisps. We have our introduction to the Wisps in this game. And this is around the time when Sega really started to care about the timeline. They were being fairly consistent. There were a few inconsistencies here and there, a few things that didn't quite add up perfectly, but they were being fairly consistent with the continuity. But Sonic Colors is when they really started to care about the timeline, and so they started having every single game come right after the events of the previous game. The events of Sonic Colors take place, and at the end, Eggman is just left adrift in space. And he comes across the Time Eater in its primordial form, and he decides to use the Time Eater to go back in time, undo his previous defeats, gain the assistance of his past self. So, so now the events of Sonic X Shadow Generations takes place. So while Sonic is having his own, while Sonic and his classic self are having their own adventure in Sonic Generations, Shadow Generations is also taking place, and Shadow gets some much needed closure from Maria and Dr. Gerald Robotnik. He gets some much needed closure. From them, and Shadow's whole story arc now finally fully feels complete, because after the events of Sonic 06, Shadow wasn't really doing much. He was just kind of doing his own thing in Sonic Rivals and Sonic Riders. He wasn't really doing much. He was just doing his own thing. He didn't really have much of a part to play in the events that transpired. He was still working for Gun. He was still working with Gun, but he was also just kind of doing his own thing, just trying to find some semblance of purpose, some semblance of happiness. But it's difficult for him to do that when he never got closure with Maria or Gerald. He never got to have that closure. He has all of his memories back, but he doesn't feel happy. He's still holding on to the past. And so in Sonic Generations, he's finally able to let go of that past. He gets the closure he needed, and he's finally able to let go of the past. So so that honestly feels like a really good conclusion to Shadow's story arc. It really does. It feels like a fantastic conclusion to his story arc. Then after the events of Sonic X Shadow Generations, Sonic Lost World occurs. Sonic Lost World occurs after Sonic Generations and before Sonic Forces, because Zavok, or a illusion of Zavok, appears in Sonic Forces. Sonic would not even recognize Zavok if it weren't for the events of Sonic Lost World, so we know that has to take place next after Sonic X Shadow Generations. Then and then finally the last game in this part of the timeline, Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces occurs. Eggman finally having had enough, and discovering the Ruby that we last saw all the way back in Sonic Mania, Plus. It came to him. When, at the end of Sonic Mania Plus, when Classic Sonic and the Ruby got transported back to this dimension, because yes, after the events of Sonic Generations, the classic Sonic went back to his time and had knowledge that he wasn't supposed to have. He had knowledge that he wasn't supposed to have. So it created an alternate timeline, basically an alternate dimension. So that's why Tails says, "You're the Sonic from another dimension, aren't you?" Because, yes, he is from another dimension. Because he has knowledge that classic Sonic was not supposed to have. So it actually does fit. It actually does fit in the timeline. So anyway, so Eggman found the Ruby and used it on Infinite. Shadow got his campaign before the events of Sonic Forces, where he was trapped in a null space. He was trapped in a null space and managed to break out, and helped Sonic and team take down Infinite and Eggman's army, and Eggman himself. Eggman after that was trapped in null space. He would get out, and he would learn of something. he would get out with knowledge of null space. He would see things in null space that would eventually lead him to the islands of Sonic Frontiers. The things he sees there would eventually lead him to those islands. However, him getting out did cause him to go a little crazy. He spent a little too long in there, and so he went a little cuckoo. He went a little nuts. So after that, it's on to the next. It's on to the next era. That is the end of. That is the end of the World Tour era of Sonic the Hedgehog. There's only 2 eras left, and each one only has 6 games in it. It only has 6 entries in it. I shouldn't even say games because 2 of the entries in the next era are not games. They're shows, but they are shows that have been confirmed that have already been confirmed canon by Sega. And I'm trying to find out exactly where they would fit in. So yeah. So there's two eras left. There's 2 eras left. So we are nearing the end of the Sonic timeline. So that's gonna do it for part 5. So thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that good jazz. And I will see you all in the next video for part 6, the Boom Era. Take care, everyone.